So through this week, I've been going deeply into really reflecting on the 26th gene key, which deals with the concept of pride. And as I've been really allowing this energy to immerse, I've watched how life has come alive to teach me all about pride. And it began with a really intense kick in the ego, to put it that way. You know, I was in a session with somebody and I went into this session. It was a little bit out of my comfort zone, and before I went into it, I was really kind of just confident. I felt, yep, I've got this under control. Everything always works out. I know what I'm doing. Everything's going to be fine. And I kind of went into the session a little bit unprepared. And when I wasn't able to kind of maintain the space and hold control of that situation, I suddenly found myself losing my self-worth, losing my belief in myself. My confidence just dropped out like a trapdoor from beneath me. And it felt like I was in an aeroplane, one of these biplanes that has gone up too high and the oxygen's now starving in the engine. It begins to stall and the engine's put out, and then I'm free falling. And it felt like that. It felt like my pride was battered. I was free falling in this spiral towards the earth, and just, it was intense. And I watched how the emotion stirred up, and then the pride, the wounded pride, wanted to find a reason, wanted to find an excuse, wanted to look for an external reason as to why I shouldn't have even been there. It wasn't my place. I don't want to do this anymore. And all this monkey mind to try and offload this panic spiral to try and recover. And I just kind of watched it. Thankfully, due to the work and the self-awareness cultivated over time, I was able to just kind of use that as contemplation, brutally painful contemplation as it went through. And I found that when I let go, I was able to pull up before I hit the earth. And I didn't react. I didn't take any actions and initiate any new kind of reactive processes. Instead, just sat with that feeling and that feeling of the beaten pride. And then as I started coming out of that and settling, and then life kind of balanced out, it just takes time. You know, sometimes we just need restraint and to breathe and allow our plane to steady out again, to let oxygen come back into the engines and settle. And then to counter this experience of the shadow of pride, where my pride got beaten, I then had this incredibly magical experience where I went to my son's assembly. Now, my son Felix, he's 8, turning 9 in January, and we decided to try school. He's been kind of unschooled or free schooled, or however you want to think about it. We basically were just learning through life and enjoying the experience. And this year he went in and wanted to try year 3 at our local school in the hills here. Exquisite little school. Big shout out to Wollaston Primary School. It's done a lot in healing my personal wounding around the schooling system. And Felix has thrived there. He's had a great time. And I went along to the assembly and got to watch my son receive the We Are Kind award, the kindness award. And I couldn't think of a better award to win at his first year at school, and as acknowledgement for how far he's come in being human. And I watched this immense pride filling up, and it was like holding back the tears, and it was tough to stand there and witness this, to not break with just tears of just this immense fatherly pride and that came up. And then I was at the assembly for the closing of year 3, watching the year 6s graduate from the school, and the parents that came along and the rest. And I felt this immense pride, not just in my own son, but in the school, in the other children, in his friends, and in the parents that came along, the teachers, the principal, Mr. Bernie, who's finishing up. And I watched this feeling of pride really welling up in me. I thought, what is this? What is this feeling of pride that's positive? Because I so often associate it with a negative ego pride. And then it made me think of a pride of lions. So the collective noun for a group of lions is a pride of lions. And a pride of lions is the lions and the lionesses and the cubs. It's the only species of cat that creates like a social community. and in order to survive. And a pride of lions looks after each other. They all play their roles. And in playing their roles, they allow the survival of the pride to exist. And so I felt like, wow, that's what I felt at the school on those days. Was I didn't just feel a pride as in I raised that boy. It wasn't I that made him who he is. It was pride in my son for doing the work, my son for becoming human. It was a pride in the teachers for holding the space that allowed him to discover his own emotional regulation and kindness and allow that to express itself. It was a deep appreciation and pride in the other children and their emotional maturity to work together to allow my son to have that experience. And it was an immense pride in all of the parents that gathered that made this community school possible. Because they all came together and offered their love and support and didn't just drop their kids off and say, yep, it's the school's business, I'm off. But they all took part. And of course it's hard, it's a struggle, it's not easy in these times, but they still made the effort. And I realized that's this beautiful feeling of pride. It's not that any one of us are in control. It's that all of us are stepping back and allowing ourselves to play our part, allow us to play each of our scripts, and together, the artfulness of how we are able to use our egos constructively to create these stages for these exquisite plays of being human to flourish and thrive at workplaces, at schools, and when the ego steps into role and is not in the way, then the ego is an incredible tool that helps facilitate light to become manifest and to express itself. So it's not to remove the ego, but to put the ego into service. Thy will be done. The ego is there to play out your script, your purpose, together with others. And then this immense feeling of pride, the gift of pride, begins to come. And the shadow side of pride, the one that I felt when I got triggered and when I went into my downward spiral, that was pride that came from me feeling like I need to do this alone. That it's my job, I need to do this, and I failed. And so I now need to carry the burden of the failure alone. And any achievement that I get is mine alone. And this idea that we need to do things alone, which very much is as accentuated by the way we're brought up in suburbs in the Western world with chicken coop houses, keeping us separate from our neighbors and more becoming isolated into our only connection is in the digital world. It kind of encourages this idea of, hey, you need to sort your shit out. You need to be the one that gets your successes and burden the failures, when all of us are collectively holding a part of the wound. And we can't do it alone. We need to do it together. And so the big lesson I've got from this journey through the 26th Gene Key this week is that it's not my will be done. It's thy will be done. And whether you think of it as thy will as some God figure up there or some collective mental field around the earth or the collective human intention, it's thy will of nature, thy will of evolution, thy will of consciousness itself that will live itself through me and through all of us. Thy will be done. And each of us are here in a way to facilitate the frequency of light that gets to be expressed. And as each of us hone our ability to not get attached to thinking we are our egos and we are alone in doing this, but let go of that kind of ownership of the successes and the losses, and instead really just drop into deep surrender and commitment to playing out your script. Whatever it is that has turned up on your plate in this lifetime, that's your artfulness. Can you step back out and actually bring your resources, your colors, your textures, your different aspects of you to the world and mix it together with all the other egos to create art, to allow the human experience to flourish and thrive? And as we move forwards and begin to allow our egos to be in service, to fully bring ourselves to the stage, in service of this higher will, then we begin in time to disappear. We begin to be invisible, like a great actor disappears, and the character they are playing, the script begins to come out and shine through them, and they become simply the vessel to allow the character to live through. And then we become invisible. Then we step back, like the puppeteer pulling the strings, disappearing into the background, and just allow this show to go on and to celebrate it together. The greatest fairy tale ever told. And with every heartbeat, we write a new line.